Okay, so what I'm gonna do is go through setting up a CoinNet demo. Setting up the CoinNet demo. So I've done a couple things just for brevity. I've downloaded the repo, added my envs for GitHub and HackMD APIs, and then and ran make setup all. And all it does is it clones the repositories and then generates the configs. And so I'll just show you what that looks like. And just kind of goes through and just verifies everything's good, downloads the requirements, and then gives you kind of like a little overview of all of the services that you have. And so what we can do is now do step one, which is make the coordinator. Oops. Okay. There we go. Perfect. Open another tab. And let's do make HackMD sensor. Perfect. And then the HackMD processor. Perfect. And now go back and do the the GitHub sensor. Perfect. Awesome. And so what this is doing is I specified a HackMD note, and then I specified a GitHub repo about, which essentially, if the premise is that you have a HackMD note with, let's say, requirements, and then a actual GitHub repo, essentially you can get updates to the note, and then updates to the GitHub repo, and essentially have somewhat of like a real live feed of changes to each, and how you configure the network is essentially what is possible with that information or those knowledge objects. And so now we have the sensor running. Let's go into the processor, which is kind of like call it the endpoint of each of the nodes, but it's a separate node. And so now we'll run, okay, perfect. Awesome. Okay, so now what we have is a network setup of a coordinator, a GitHub sensor, a HackMD sensor, a GitHub processor, and a HackMD processor. And so now what I'm going to do is I'll show you. So these are 5 individual nodes, 5 individual services. And so now you have the last node, which is the processor. And so you've got, and so there's a CLI that I built. And so here you go. If you run this, you'll see that when we specified a note in the config of the sensor, we can now access the details of that note in the processor via whatever means necessary. Right now, it's just a simple CLI. Okay, boom. So now it's saying, here's the node ID, here's the title, and with dates it's created, word count. And so imagine that you can actually get the content of the note. You can get a lot of things. There's some really cool stuff that you can do now that you have this, and it's updated, etc. So now we'll do the same thing, but for the GitHub processor. Boom. So now we have the BlockScience CoinNet repo, first indexed, and then the date that it was last updated, and then total events. And so you can do pretty much anything you want from there. And so if you imagine you have a set of requirements and a set of, or a GitHub repo, and you want to make sure that as requirements update, you want to run a comparative evaluation of the requirements against repo changes, and then send a Slack message with, say, warnings or anything of the sort. You can do that now, basically automated, all with like a single simple orchestrator script that we have here. And that's about it. Thank you.